everyone listening to this right now is relentlessly passionate in pursuit of something. I'm just here to say that you should just be as relentlessly passionate in your pursuit of relationships too.
I'm Michael Hyatt.
And I'm Megan Hyatt Miller.
And this is The Double Win, a show about winning at work and succeeding at life.
And here at our company, Full Focus, we have identified 9 life domains that you can cultivate to help you be the person that you want to be and live the life you want to live. Those are body, mind, spirit, love, family, community, money, work, and hobbies.
So today's guest is Will Guidara. He's the former co-owner of 11 Madison Park, which was one of the top restaurants in New York City when he was running it, which received 4 stars from the New York Times, 3 Michelin stars, and was named #1 on the world's 50 best restaurants list in 2017. He co-founded another successful New York restaurant, Nomad. He's a co-author of 4 cookbooks and one of the best books on customer service ever, which is called Unreasonable Hospitality. And get this subtitle: The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. New York Times bestseller for multiple months in a row. Great book. And hospitality is one of those things that whether you know it or not, it applies to every area of your life. How you show up for your family, how you show up at work, how you treat your customers and clients and friends and children, everything in between. So without further ado, here's Will Guidara. Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
We are so excited to have this conversation because we love this book.
We love this book.
Unreasonable Hospitality. We love it. We love it.
I read this book last year, and then I got obnoxiously pushy with everybody I know. And I just said, you've got to read this book. All my private coaching clients, I told them, you got to read this book because this applies to everything.
It really does. And you were obnoxious. I'm just going to confirm that because he kept asking me, have you read this book? Have you read this book? Did you get it yet? Have you read it? Have you downloaded it? I'm like, okay, I'll read this book. I didn't know anything about it except that, you were really excited. Usually your recommendations are really good. And I was so excited when you got into the book that it had to do with food. Okay, so I totally missed that part on the beginning because I love great restaurants. We are huge fans of food and hospitality. Our absolute favorite place to go on the planet is Blackberry Farm in East Tennessee. I don't know if you've been there, Will, but if you haven't, you must go.
No, I've been to Blackberry a few different times. I was actually at Blackberry Mountain 10 days ago.
Well, we just love it. And so anyway, I think it helped me understand why I love it so much. And it inspired me to want to give that same gift in our context to our audience, our community of people, just really elevated what I thought was possible. So I'm selfishly thrilled to have this conversation and get to talk to you.
I am so excited to be with you guys and can't wait to get into it.
Well, I want to talk about the restaurant business because, one of the things that we try to stand against is kind of this burnout culture, this hustle culture that we have where people are working unbelievable hours. And to the extent that they're often sacrificing their best life for the sake of, just doing all business all the time. And so they have no margin for anything else. But I just love for you to talk about what it's like to be in the restaurant business because, we've given all this in your bio, but, you're a world-renowned restaurateur. And so just talk about that for a minute.
I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that I hear people say all the time, those in and out of the restaurant business, is it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. And gosh, I hate that. I hate that because for those inside the restaurant business, if you continually say something is hard, then maybe do something else. Sincerely, what's the point? If you don't like it, don't do it. I think the restaurant business it's the only thing I've ever done in my life up until the point that I wrote this book and started to do all the things I'm doing now. But you see all these TV shows or movies where the restaurant is such a sole focus in the chef or restaurateur's life that they either suffer depression or imbalance. I think the restaurant business is like any business. The The culture you build is the culture you decide to build. And any business has seasons where you do need to work all the time, right? No one becomes ultra successful without knowing when you just need to put your head down and give all of yourself in pursuit of some finite goal along the way. But I think the restaurant business can have just as much balance as any business if you set things up in the right way. And if, like anything, you decide that balance is a non-negotiable.
Was there ever a point in your history where you were out of balance and then suddenly you had a realization and said, something's got to change in my life and in the way I'm running my business?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just 11 Madison Park, I'll stick with that time horizon. I got there in 2006. I sold the business in 2019. And it was a big lift, what we did there. We took a 2-star brasserie and turned it into the #1 restaurant in the world. There were a few pretty intense pushes there along the way. And I think when you become so obsessed with those finite goals along the way, you can lose yourself in pursuit of them. And I remember one season, gosh, I definitely lost myself in it. And I write about this in the book. There was this moment where one of our cooks ran into the kitchen in the middle of dinner service. She worked the lunch shift and she ran into the kitchen in the middle of dinner service thinking that she was late to her shift the next day. And it was just one of those oh shoot moments where it just became clear that we had our foot all the way down to the gas for so long that the train was starting to come off the tracks. And I think when you're a leader, sometimes you need to not think about your own bandwidth and your own capacity and your own burnout point, because different people are built differently. I can push really, really hard for a really long time, but if I just expect that everyone else can do what I can do, I'm going to leave the team behind. And the entire role of a leader is to, at every possible opportunity, bring everyone along with you on that ride.
When I read this book, I think the thing that stuck out to me more than any other was the beautiful obsession with excellence. And what I love about it wasn't a narcissistic obsession with excellence. It felt like a very other-centered, humanizing, honoring way of seeing the people that you serve, in your case, literally. And that pursuit of excellence and quality and care of people, how do you balance the tension between that and doing that at such a high level and also creating a culture and an environment for the people who you, as the business owner or the leader, are serving, who work for you, so that they have a similarly excellent experience providing that experience to others, if that makes sense? How do you balance those two things?
So it's interesting. How I would actually articulate what you just said is that you were inspired by our pursuit of hospitality.
Yeah.
And I say that with intention because I talk often about how excellence and hospitality are conflicting goals. They're not friends with one another. It's easy to run an excellent organization. It's easy to run a hospitable organization. It's much harder to do the two at the same time.
Right.
You can run an excellent organization if you scare the crap out of the people that work for you, such that they're going to get in so much trouble if they ever make a mistake, and they're going to be less likely to make mistakes. But if they're living in a constant state of fear, they're never going to be able to bring their most fully realized selves to the table. Similarly, you can create an amazingly hospitable organization if you're just, high-fiving your team and giving them back rubs, but never holding them accountable to any standard of excellence. And it's going to be a really friendly organization, but, you're going to go into that restaurant, you're never going to get a plate of food served to you. Pursuing them both at the same time is difficult. Now, to actually answer your question, hospitality is a team sport. It doesn't matter how hospitable I am as the leader of the organization. It's the extent to which everyone on the team is inspired and engaged and driven to be hospitable, the extent to which they are bought into the spirit of the collective endeavor that defines the experience as a whole. So the only way to actually bring what we did to life in any organization is through a culture of true empowerment where everyone on the team feels a great sense of agency. Now, how did I make sure that what I was trying to extend to the guest was embraced by the team? Which, by the way, it's a great question because you can't expect people to treat your customers in a way that they are not treated.
Yeah.
Oh, say that again.
You can't expect your people to treat your customers in a way that they themselves are not treated.
This is powerful if you lead a business.
And so there's two sides of it. Okay, yeah, I took care of the team. Like, we had good benefits. We had great parties. We had things to look forward to.
Parties.
I mean, by the way, I really do think that in any culture, my dad always says the secret to happiness is always having something to look forward to. If your team doesn't have a few inflection points over the course of the year, moments where they can play just as hard, if not harder than they work, I think you're leaving a beautiful cultural opportunity on the table.
Wow. That's a great takeaway.
But also, empowering the team to be hospitable, giving them the permission and the resources to do so is on its own a gesture of hospitality to them. So many people and so many businesses complain that it's hard to recruit and retain good people, but yeah, of course it's hard to recruit and retain good people if they feel zero control over their own destiny, if they have no ability to bring other people joy. Because, by the way, I don't think there's anything more energizing than when you get to see the look on someone else's face when they receive a gift you are responsible for giving them. If you can create a culture where everyone in your team is empowered to give other people gifts, that on its own is a gesture of hospitality to the gift givers as much as it is to the gift receivers.
I love that. Okay, so I'm now remembering, it's been a while since I read this book, but I'm remembering a story about
hot dogs.
No, not hot dogs, although that's great too.
Story.
What I was thinking of was, didn't you promote someone internally who was very young to become the head of your beverage program? Can you tell that story a little bit? Because I think it's a great example.
I do want to get to a hot dog story in a minute.
Okay.
So.
Hold your horses just for a second.
So Simon Sinek, who is my publisher on this book, is his book, The Infinite Game, which I love, 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 love that book. And one of the things he talks about in it is the importance of having a worthy rival, right? Like picking a competitor and using them to drive you. And our competitor for many, many years in New York City was a restaurant called Per Se.
Yeah.
And I would go there every year. And for the first few years, I'd leave deflated and frustrated by how much better than they were than us. And with each passing year, I'd leave saying, all right, we actually do this better than them, but they still do this better than us. And yet at the same time, I'd look for things they didn't do well. Because if they weren't doing something well, I probably also wasn't doing it well, but maybe this was the thing I could invest in because strategically now I would, by definition, be better than them at that. And one night I went there, I had an amazing meal. And when I say perfect, I mean perfect. Until the very end of the meal when I ordered a cup of coffee and they poured me coffee and it was just fine. I like to journal every night. I journal for a few different reasons. One, because my dad long ago told me that perspective has an expiration date and journaling is the best way to hold on to your perspective such that you can tap back into it later in life. I journal because I'm an intense person and I think I'm a pretty good, kind man, but I let my emotions get away from me once in a while. And at the end of the day, once, you know, the sea is calm, I can identify the moments I need to apologize for the next day. But I also journal because that's when I can put intention to intuition and actually review the experiences of the day and come up with a game plan for tomorrow. And I was journaling after that meal and reflecting on it and said, the coffee, why wasn't the coffee good? And with a bit of consideration, it was clear. In most fine dining restaurants, especially then, it's changed a little bit now. All the beverage programs, the wine, beer, cocktails, coffee, tea, are run by a wine director who, by definition, is passionate about wine. And yet they're saddled with these other responsibilities when at the same time, in most fine dining restaurants, there's a bunch of people in the restaurant desperately craving more responsibility. I found, and I've done this exercise, a lot of people in different companies, if you put all of your people, like open up an Excel sheet, put all your people across the top, and then list their responsibilities down, very often it goes up and down, up and down. Responsibilities rarely are equally distributed. Which means a lot of people don't feel empowered and a lot of people feel overwhelmed. In this case, there's one director dealing with a bunch of programs he had no passion for, while there were other people on my team that were so passionate about those exact things. And at the time, the average age of my team was like 24 years old. And I had a busboy who was so excited about coffee, a food runner that was so passionate about tea. You get the gist. And so the next day in pre-meal, I just said, hey, we are no longer following the rule that you need to be a manager to have responsibility. Who wants to run these programs? And I handpicked coffee, tea, whatever. It was very, very difficult in the short term. Extraordinarily difficult. These people had never run a beverage program before. It took much more of our time in the short term. In the long term, a few different things happened. One, the coffee list, the beer list, the tea list, all of them, within a year, and this is not bombastic, were rated one of the best of their kind in America because they had one person uniquely focused on that thing. Two, all of them were much more engaged in every other detail of the restaurant because now they felt a sense of ownership in what we were doing and where we were going. Three, everyone on the team was more passionate about those programs because now they were supporting one of their peers and their passions. And four, the wine list got better because the person running it was no longer distracted with things they cared so much less about. I really do believe that if everyone did an ownership interrogation where they looked at all of the things close to the bottom of one person's list and tried to move them to the top of someone else's list, someone who perhaps doesn't even have a list yet, more equally distribute ownership is the most effective way to more equally dole out opportunities for passion.
I'm curious, Will, the subtitle of your book is The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. Where did that come from? I mean, that's not common.
That's funny. I say this a lot. We're in this really unfortunate cultural season where we're just not used to people going above and beyond for us that often anymore. And I'm always sensitive that I'm not glorifying the past as always being better than the present, but I really do think that's true right now. It feels like there's less of a motivation to do that now. But my gosh, when it happens, it feels good. I don't know exactly where it came from. I mean, when I was a kid, and I read about this in the book, people often tell me that they cried when they read the book, and it's most often because of this story, which is that my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer, ultimately became a quadriplegic, and my dad and I were a team. We were a two-person team charged with him having a job, me going to school, and then together taking care of my mom. My dad moved our house so that it was within walking distance of my school because he was always very concerned about me growing up with a lack of confidence and never wanted me to be too overly reliant on other people's parents to drive me around. And so he purposefully bought a home close to school, which had a really big hangout room upstairs so that we became the place that everyone went, and I never needed someone to give me a ride.
Wow.
I'm telling the story because I think there's two parts of this that perhaps answer that question. One, my dad is unbelievable, and he is the most inspiring person in the world to me. And that started because through that entire experience with my mom, he never felt bad for himself. In fact, to the contrary, I saw him derive pleasure out of being called to serve her. And so I did too. I grew up loving having had the opportunity to serve my mom. And if I could go back in time, obviously I would have changed it had I had a magic wand and she could be healthy and alive with us today. But I looked at my other friends and said, wow, they never get to take care of their mom like I do. Like we wore it as a badge of honor.
Wow. That's amazing.
But then also, since everyone always came over to my house, I was the host. I was the entertainer. And I just got really into creating awesome experiences for my friends when they came over. And so I think it was just embedded in me as a kid. And then I went on to work for Danny Meyer, who was an unbelievable restaurateur. And his book, Set in the Table, is the other great hospitality book that's been written. And I consider mine to be a sequel to his. But yeah, it's just a part of who I am and what I'm driven by, what I derive pleasure from.
I do want to illustrate this, not from my life, but from your story in the book about the hot dogs. Because I think this demonstrates what it's like to create delight in other people, but you have to go outside of your comfort zone and do something that's sort of out of the norm.
Yeah, so the hot dog story has become a big one, most notably because if anyone out there has seen the show The Bear, they use this story as the central thesis for one of their episodes. I had written down these words, unreasonable hospitality, a couple of years before this happened, and I didn't actually understand what they meant when I wrote them down. I simply just knew that they represented the impact I wanted to make in my industry. By the way, I think it's okay to pursue something you don't fully understand. I think a lot of people spend so much time trying to perfectly articulate an idea, they never start pursuing it. But I really do believe if you feel enough of a connection to something, just start running towards it and trust in the fact that it will reveal itself to you along the way. And then one day I was in the dining room on a busier than normal lunch service. The servers were just getting killed, right? You know, on those days, everyone's been to a restaurant when they're in the weeds and everyone's running around, and that's when, if you're a good owner or a good leader, you step in to help. And when you do, or when I did, I would always just bust tables. I think that's also important. The higher up in the hierarchy you get, the more important it is that when you chip in, you do the most menial task. A, to remind your team that you're good at that stuff, and B, to show them very clearly that you'll never ask them to do something you're not willing to do yourself.
Love that.
So true.
And I was clearing dirty plates from this table of four. There were 4 foodies on vacation to New York from Europe just to eat at restaurants. That was the whole point of their trip. And this was their last meal. They were going to the airport right afterwards to head back home. And while I was at the table, I overheard them talking, and they were going on and on about the trip they'd had. They'd been to Le Bernardin and Danielle and Jean-Georges and Per Se, and now I live in Madison Park. And if you're listening and you have no idea what those restaurants are, trust in the fanciness of the names, that they're really good ones. But then one woman jumped in and said, yeah, but you know what? I never got to have a New York City hot dog. It's such an iconic part of the city. I'm kind of sad I never got one. And it was like one of those light bulb moments in a cartoon. I calmly walked back into the kitchen, dropped off the plates, then ran outside, bought a hot dog from the cart, ran back inside. Then came the hard part, which was convincing my fancy chef to serve it in our fancy restaurant. But I told him it was important to me. And he cut the hot dog up into 4 perfect pieces, and we put one of the pieces on each plate, put a little swish of ketchup and mustard, a little scoop of sauerkraut and relish, made them all look really, really fancy. And then before their final savory course, which was our signature honey lavender glazed Muscovy duck that had been dry aged for 2 weeks using a technique that had taken us years to perfect.
I'll take one.
I brought out what we in New York call a dirty water dog to the table. And they freaked out. You know, I'd served like millions of dollars worth of food in my career to that point, and the fancy stuff too, right? Like Wagyu beef and lobster and caviar and all this stuff. And yet I had never seen anyone react to anything I served them like they did to that hot dog. And that moment, that experience, reflecting on it, systemizing that approach is ultimately what opened the doors to us doing everything we went on to do.
That's an amazing story. So I should have asked you this at the beginning, but how do you define hospitality? What does that mean to you? And how do you know you've achieved it?
You know, sometimes the best way to understand what something is to first start by understanding what it's not. I think way too many people conflate service and hospitality as being the same thing. They're undeniably very, very different things. Service is a part of the product. In my world, service is getting the right plate of food to the right person within the right amount of time and charging them the right amount of money for that plate of food. Service is just keeping the baseline promise you've made.
Mm-hmm.
Hospitality is how you make people feel when you do that thing. Do they feel seen? Do they feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel genuinely welcome? Do they feel a sense of connection to you? Do they feel like you are pursuing them with creativity and intention? But of the many ones I just ripped through, I think one of the best, like, ones in its ability to help people understand it is, do they feel seen? I was in a conversation with a buddy of mine, and you know, when you have your friends that try to just poke holes and everything, so like, is this service or hospitality? Is this service or hospitality? He's just like ripping through a bunch of stuff. And one of the things, like, so if they see that I'm on a first date and it's not going well, and so they speed up the meal, is that service or hospitality? I said, you said it in the question. You said, if they see that, right? It's people like being present enough with you, paying enough attention, trying hard enough to understand you such that they contour what they're doing in a way that it happens for you, not to you. That's hospitality.
That, first of all, is brilliant. But how in the world do you teach that or build that into a culture? And I get that probably as a leader, you've got to set the pace and be the example. But how do you get that all the way down so that, you know, the person who's refilling the water is observant and present and all the things you said?
So, first of all, you can systemize it. I believe you can create systems within your organization that are inherently hospitable. And the story that I love to tell that I think most perfectly illustrates this happened to me last year. I was speaking at Sundance at the film festival, and anyone who flew anywhere in 2023 can relate to the fact that flights were delayed constantly. This one was particularly bad. It was like delayed 7 hours or something, and I got to the hotel at 4 a.m. And one of my pet peeves is how it's becoming more and more time consuming to check into a hotel these days. And I'm exhausted. I'd just woken up having slept for the hour drive from the airport and walked in gearing up for a lengthy check-in. But there's just one person in the hotel. It's 4 a.m, the overnight manager, the guy named Oscar. And he's just standing in the hotel holding my room key. He didn't know who I was. This was not special for me. He only knew who I was because I was the last person literally to get there. And he said, Mr. Guidara, you must be exhausted. Here's your room key. Just go get some sleep. We can check you in the morning.
Wow.
You know, sometimes these little things, the smallest gestures are the most profound when they hit that hard in that moment. And I went up to my room, fell asleep immediately. And the next morning, I've never been more excited to check into a hotel. I ran downstairs, checked in, and then ran around trying to find the general manager. Found him. And I said, hey, dude, Oscar. He's unbelievable. He must be the most hospitable person on your team. You'll never believe what he did for me. And he goes, Oscar is amazing, and I can tell you exactly what he did for you because it had nothing to do with Oscar. And I said, what? He goes, a few months ago, we had a meeting. The delays into Utah have been terrible. And so he said, how do we systemize hospitality? And that's what they came up with. If you checked into that hotel after 1 or 2 in the morning, I forget what it was, they gave you the key, let you go to sleep, they'd check you in the morning. That's cool. What's cooler is that he went on to say that, in fact, Oscar was not hospitable at all.
Amazing.
When they started the program. But they gave Oscar a system to follow. They asked him to color within the lines. And every time he did that, he saw the looks on people's faces like the one he saw on mine, and ultimately became addicted to those looks. And over time started to come up with more and more creative displays of hospitality because they got him addicted. So what I'm saying is 2 things. 1, you can systemize it. If any business just does some simple pattern recognition, looks for some recurring moments, and then decides how they want to respond every time those moments occur, and just makes it a part of the system, no differently than you've never been to a hotel and wondered whether or not the person at the front desk was going to remember to run your credit card, right? They've just decided that that's normal. At that hotel, they decided that what Oscar did for me was now normal. It was not going above and beyond for for me anymore. It was normal. If you normalize this stuff, it can get people addicted to it. And then suddenly the culture takes root in a pretty viral and amazing way.
Can you give us some examples that are like outside of the restaurant or general hospitality space, like a service-based business, or, you know, you work at a bank, or I don't know, just something where it's not as natural?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, so I do this on my Instagram now, where people send me these stories all the time. And then I read these letters, and I call it Unreasonable Hospitality out in the world. And gosh, these stories are so beautiful and so inspiring. And this is the one that I think I just read. I'm not sure if I posted it yet, but I love this one so much. So a guy wrote in that he is like 21 years old. He still goes to his pediatric dentist, which I didn't realize that's a thing. People like develop such an emotional connection to their pediatric dentist that they just stay with them for as long as they can. And he's been going there since he was a little kid. And over the years, you know, like when he didn't have a cavity, they'd take a Polaroid of him and they'd put it on the no cavity wall for the next month. And that was like a thing there. And anyway, he went to the dentist not too long ago. And on his way out, he goes to make his next appointment. They're like, oh my gosh, you must not have gotten our letter. Like, you're too old for the pediatric dentist now. This was your last appointment with us. But they had it all figured out to give him recommendations for where to go next and whatever. But he was sad, right? Like this was like a thing that he'd really loved, or a person that he really loved. Anyway, he goes home, goes back to his life. 2 weeks later, a package comes from that dentist, from the pediatric dentist. And he assumes that he forgot to pay the bill or something, and it's the invoice. But he opens it up, and it is every single Polaroid that they took of him since he was a little kid for the no cavity wall.
Oh my gosh.
All put together in a little book for him to have for the rest of his life. They gave him the ability to walk down memory lane and relive so many beautiful moments. And by the way, that's not hard. So they must have a file cabinet somewhere. They do it, and it's like it's like a long game, right? They play the long game. But the beautiful thing about these gestures of hospitality is when you give people stories like this to tell, guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell them over and over and over again. And if you lived in the city where that pediatric dentist was located, I guarantee you have a new kid, you're sending them to him.
That's right.
They exist all over.
We were talking earlier about Blackberry Farm, which is, we both enjoyed that. And we talk about it nonstop because of the extraordinary experiences that we've had there. But one of the challenges, I think, last night I was listening to an interview with Brian Chesky, who's the founder of Airbnb. And he was talking about sort of this exercise they would do called the 11-star exercise. Have you heard of this? So he says, they will engineer some experience, and they say, okay, what would take it from whatever star it is in their own estimation to a 5-star? What is a 6-star, 7-star? And it's outrageous by the time you get to 11-star experience. And then he says, okay, you got to expand your thinking. What's an 11-star experience? And then back it down to what's, reasonable, what you can actually fulfill time and time again. But I think one of the challenges of doing this as a business person, it seems to me, is that what you deliver that's extraordinary becomes expected. And then it kind of loses its punch, because now, like if I go to Blackberry Farm, I love it, but I'm not wowed anymore because I expect it.
Well, my instinct, and I'm not sitting comfortably in your brain right now, but is that the things you expect are still the excellence things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a part of running an excellent business, right? Like if people expect you to be really excellent, you just need to be consistently excellent. And it's no longer surprising to people, but isn't that kind of the point? Like you deliver consistently on an idea, and they go to you because they don't want to be surprised.
I think that's so true, because at Blackberry Farm, it is not inexpensive. We were just, talking about that. We could go to Europe and probably spend the same amount of money. But part of what I love about going there, I'm a perfectionist. I'm really a perfectionist about hospitality. Like, I never say anything is as good as that. And I love that when I'm there, I know that I'm not going to feel that cognitive dissonance between my expectations and reality. I love that I'm going to feel nurtured, that I'm going to feel seen, to your point, Will. I love that I know I can order both desserts and both entrees if I want to. And somebody's going to help me find a great wine that I've never had before that I love, and it's not going to be intimidating. Like the things that were surprising the first time are comforting now.
Yes, and the hospitality side,
Yeah,
is still surprising.
it is because it's so unique.
Well, because when you're doing it the right way, no two moments are the same. So I'll tell you the two stories, two things that happened for me when I was at Blackberry 10 days ago. It was me and my wife and another couple that had just gotten married. We took them to Blackberry as their wedding gift, and his wife, one of her jokes going down there is, we're all getting tattoos together this weekend. Like we're gonna, and I'm knowing that I will never get a tattoo in my entire life, but it was just something. And apparently on their golf cart ride to their room, she mentioned that. And the next day we all had temporary tattoos placed in our rooms.
Oh, I love it.
That was beautiful.
Yes. Second
one is, we were playing pickleball one morning. We were in the golf cart on our way back to our rooms, and somehow magically, we have no idea how, my long sleeve shirt that I had taken off to play pickleball was gone. We couldn't find it. It was just gone. I asked the people at Blackberry if anyone turned out a shirt or turned a shirt into lost and found. They didn't. Next morning, or not even the next morning, later that day, a long sleeve Blackberry Mountain t-shirt was in my room waiting for me.
Wow.
Saying we couldn't find your shirt, but here's one on us. Right? Those things.
Yeah.
When it's real, genuine thoughtfulness, it's never expected, because it's like a magic trick every single time. And
yeah.
When I go to see a magician, a great magician, I love magic. Do I know they're going to blow my mind? Yeah, that's why I'm going to see him. Am I still like, what the heck just happened every time they do one of those tricks? Absolutely. I believe everything I talk about. It's just magic, but around thoughtfulness. The magician duo, Penn and Teller, there's a famous quote by Teller. Sometimes magic is just being willing to invest more energy into something than anyone else could reasonably expect. That's everything I'm talking about.
That's powerful.
It's just caring more and trying harder.
I love that.
One of the things you say in the book is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And if I had a nickel for every time I've quoted you on that, I would be very wealthy. But I think it's so powerful. So how does this whole concept of hospitality, of unreasonable hospitality, show up in other areas of your life?
I mean, relationships are relationships, and I believe so many of the lessons you learn from those in life can be applied to those at work and vice versa. I think some of the worst advice I was ever given when I was a kid is like, hey, you got to really, keep work and life separated. Like, you got to really keep one over here and one over here. And I think that's just the dumbest advice anyone could ever give, because if you're really passionate about your work, which I hope as many people out there are as possible, and you're really passionate about your life and you keep them too separate, you're constantly feeling guilty when you're pursuing one that you're not also pursuing the other. But also, if you keep them too separate, you fail to realize how much overlap there is in how to thrive at both. And so I just believe life at the end of the day is a collection of relationships. And I mean, unreasonable hospitality is just that. It's being relentless, unreasonable, creative, and intentional in pursuit of relationships, whether that's with the people that work for you, the people you work with, the people you serve, or your spouse, your kids, your dad, your friends. Like, everyone listening to this right now is relentlessly passionate in pursuit of something. That I've not yet met anyone who's not relentlessly passionate in pursuit of something. It could be video games. It could be watching football on Sundays, or it could be something bigger and more significant. But I'm just here to say that you should just be as relentlessly passionate in your pursuit of relationships too.
Mm.
And that manifests in different ways, but I try to love my wife in the way that I wrote that book. I try to raise my kids in the way that I wrote that book. That's proven to be the hardest one so far, but I'm working on it.
So
I get
humbling.
it. We get it.
So what do you guys eat? Like what's a normal day of what you eat? Because you're not the only food guy in your family.
Are you asking, does the cobbler's son wear shoes?
Yeah. I'm like, are you guys eating Chick-fil-A every day, or what does breakfast, lunch, and dinner look like at the Guidara household?
Because your wife's a chef too.
Yeah.
So my wife is Christina Tosi, who is the founder of Milk Bar. And
do you eat cake 3 times a day? Like, is that...
we eat a lot of cake. Yeah. By the way, I used to be Will Guidara. Now I am most known as Christina Tosi's husband, which I'm totally comfortable with.
I love that.
And she recipe tests a lot at home. So yeah, I do eat a lot more dessert than I probably should. No, we don't eat. We're not fancy people at home. I love me a chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A.
They are pretty good at hospitality.
They're amazing. I've spent some time with them now. I've spoken to them a couple times over the last year, and they're just remarkable. But you know, right now I'm up in the country. I'm on our farm up in the country. We have a Traeger. We love smoking meat up here, and it's like, for me, this is when I want to have an amazing meal, like a crazy amazing meal. I go to a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I think too many people get it wrong when it comes to eating at home. I've been to so many friends' houses, and they invite me over and other friends, and they're focused so much on impressing people with how well they can cook that you go there and they're in their kitchens cooking the entire time you're there. And what I always have to remind them is, hey, if I wanted a great meal, I'm not coming to your house. I'm going to a restaurant. I'm coming to your house because I want to spend time with you.
Yeah.
And so for us, I'll work today until 6:30 or something, and it's dinner time. And so what I don't want to do is, like, my wife and I, like, hectically, rapidly cooking for 30 minutes. I want to cook something simple, quickly, and sit down around the table with my kids and have a family dinner. That's more important to me than the food we're eating.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a really thoughtful answer that I think applies to so many areas of life.
Yeah, I think it's great. We have for a long time prioritized eating as a family around the table most nights. And, you know, sometimes that's spaghetti. I have boys that are football players, and they are just, you know, calorie consuming machines basically at this point. And so, you know, sometimes it's that, sometimes it's fun. Like last night we had our 23-year-old son over, and he requested Ina Garten's chicken with 40 cloves of garlic, which is so delicious and takes forever, you know, and all that. But that's a rarity. Like that's not how we're going to be doing it every night. That bar would be way too high. And what I want is to sit down with my kids and do what we call the gratitude report, where everybody shares, you know, what was their best thing of the day and what they're grateful for. And that's what really matters. You know, even though we love food and we try to make it yummy, it's not complicated. Might be frozen pizza.
During COVID, especially with so many different restaurants, we're rolling out like all these different frozen things.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them. So we just got tons of deliveries. We didn't order things. People were just sending us to the point where I went to Walmart and bought like one of those giant chest freezers. And so we still have frozen food from that season.
Amazing.
That we're going through. I want to add 2 things to that answer because you made me think of 2 things. One is a story that honors my wife. So before my mom was sick, like one of my great memories of her was she would make a bolognese, and it was like, it was her Italian side of her family's bolognese. And
my favorite.
I mean, just, and we had a freezer in the basement, and she would make giant pots of the bolognese, and she would, you know, we'd eat it that night, but we'd also put them in the quart containers and put them down there. And then she passed away, and I just thought I was never going to have that bolognese again. And my wife, a few years ago, just started interviewing all of the different women on my mom's Italian side of the family and got all of their descriptions for what was in that bolognese, what they remember my mom having made. such that she could reverse engineer the recipe and figure it out again. And then she taught me how to do it. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do is on Sunday, every once in a while, I'll make a giant pot of it and I'll put a bunch in the freezer. And that's an easy meal, right? Like, and it's delicious. It's incredible. The other thing I'll share is we were just in Seattle this past weekend with the Canlis family. And my buddy Brian, he has 4 kids, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And we sat down for dinner with them and they did Rose and Thorn with their kids.
Ooh.
And my 3-year-old daughter participated. And so we've done it now every night since we've been home with her.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful reminder, not only in the power of intention when it comes to connecting with people, even the ones you feel like you don't need as much intention to feel connected to, but also that kids are ready for things more quickly than we might otherwise think.
I think that's really true. We've done that with our youngest. So we have 5 kids who are 23 to 5 years old. So we have all the ages, all the stages. And the 2 oldest ones are out of the house now. But, you know, when they were younger, they used to hate the gratitude report from time to time. Like, why do we have to be hemmed in by this? I don't like this. Now, when they come home for dinner, they're excited to do the gratitude report because it's just kind of a liturgy of connection. And it's something that you can fall into that's meaningful, that you have years and years and years of memories around. And it's really special.
Well, we did this version of this when Megan and her sisters were young. We have 5 daughters. Megan's the oldest. And we did a version of that, right? So we called it the best things.
Oh, and I hated it. I was like, my mom would make us do it. It didn't matter if you had the worst day. You know, your boyfriend dumped you in middle school. It didn't matter. You were going to share a best thing no matter what.
She was relentless.
She was relentless, and it was great.
Yeah. And so
I mean, it was great after the fact, you know.
And I've watched all you girls do the same thing with your kids, which has been fun.
Right. It's neat.
I watched you pay forward the extent to which you felt tortured by me.
It's great. And then they're grateful for it too. So apparently that's how it works. You have to hate it and then you love it.
As we wrap up here, you know, we talk about the double win, winning at work and succeeding at life. What's your version of that so that you kind of maintain life balance? We know you're relentless in your work and you have achieved a level of excellence that's extraordinary, but it sounds like from our conversation that that's really, you know, what you do anywhere is what you do everywhere.
I had a conversation with a buddy of mine the other night over dinner about this. And yeah, you better win at both, because if you're losing at life and you're winning at work, it doesn't matter, right? What's the point? And yet, too often, the approach that people take to finding balance is through doing less work, which I think is short-sighted. I think the key is there are things that are energy giving and energy depleting. And I think so long as the time you spend doing what you do for a living is as energy giving as possible, then you're well equipped to win at life. But if you just start stripping down your work to the point where you don't feel the pride and satisfaction that comes from knowing you're contributing something to the world, I don't think you have the ability to win at life, no matter how much time you're spending pursuing the people that you love in life. And so I've found that I win at both when I lean into both, not when I lean more into one and lean back from the other.
This is an important nuance that I don't think we've captured before. So thank you for that. It's a gift to us. Do you think that maybe a better word than balance would be work-life integration?
Yeah, I love that.
Well, we have a handful of questions that we ask every guest that comes on the Double Win Show. And the first one is, what is the biggest obstacle right now for you in getting the double win, winning at work and succeeding in life? Because I think this changes at different seasons.
I need to get better at saying no right now. I just interviewed Ryan Holiday. You know who Ryan Holiday is?
Sure. We love him.
Because he has a new book out this week. And so I was interviewing him at the Barnes & Noble in Union Square. And I hadn't met him yet, but with the same publisher, same speaking agent. He sent me this text the next day. I do wish I'd been more confident when I started doing speaking gigs. I was always worried it was just going to suddenly stop, so I did too many and didn't turn down enough. 12 years later, ...
Wow.
That is the thing that I'm trying to figure out right now.
I think our audience can really relate to that.
Well, I can really relate to that because still you would think at my age that I would have nailed this by now, but I still struggle with saying no. There's just so much I want to experience in life and so many people I want to help and all of that. But I find that if I go all out in that, then I have nothing to be able to give. And so there's got to be an appropriate level of self-care there. And for me, that's saying no.
And I think being really conscious of not being in a place of scarcity and being in a place of abundance. And, I think that's, our human nature is one of scarcity. We have that negativity bias that our brain is wired toward. And so I think it's a lot to overcome, even when you're intentional about it. So thank you. I think that's helpful. Okay. How do you personally know when you are winning at work and succeeding at life?
I'm laughing at the answer I was about to give, which is that there's enough money in the bank and my wife's not pissed. But
you would be surprised how similar other people's answers have been to that. It's so funny.
No, but genuinely, I'm a strong believer in the fact that you need to just trust your gut. And that feeling when it doesn't happen often, but when you're just walking down the road and you realize that for that exact moment, you do not have a care in the world. When you get one of those moments, hold on to it for as long as you can, because I don't care how unanxious you may be as a person. We always have a little reverb of anxiety somewhere in the peripheral. And when I don't feel any of it at all, when I feel one of those moments of profound peace, I know that things are going pretty well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, then lastly, what is one ritual or routine that helps you do what you do?
I do like journaling, but I think everyone needs to figure out what their oxygen mask is. What is the thing that refills their pitcher, and find time to do it. The thing that brings me that fully restores me, and I don't get to do it very often, but is ordering Chinese food, sitting alone on the couch and binge watching television. And I get it maybe once a month now, or sometimes if I'm on the road, I'll literally just go to my hotel room, order Chinese food and watch TV. I crave time with people, but sometimes I just need time alone. And I think the lesson there is not to order Chinese food and binge watch TV. I think it's in the most non-judgmental way, just look for the things that bring you joy and re-energize you, and whether they feel cool or noble or widely respected, just do them. Too many people, I feel that question, they would feel this societal pressure to say meditation or journaling or my going on a run or this stuff, all of which is good, but that doesn't mean that's the only version of right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been a gift to us and to our pals that are listening. And I just am so deeply inspired by your work.
Oh man, thank you. And I know I'm no Don Miller, but it's good to it's good to hang out with people that Don Miller just hung out with, right? This is a big deal.
Oh man.
Well, we'll all have to have dinner when you move to town. It'll be great.
I just want to say I loved meeting you, however long ago that was, and to get to now spend time with both of you, it's a gift, and I can't wait to see you in person sometime soon.
Awesome.
Us too. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
That was really amazing.
It was so amazing.
I didn't really know what to expect. As I mentioned before, Will and I are in the same mastermind together, so I've spent a little bit of time with him, and I feel like I know him because I read his book.
Yeah.
But he honestly exceeded my expectations, which of course is sort of the driving force of his life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was surprising to me that I wouldn't have known to expect was just how thoughtful he was and how present to the conversation he was. It was clear there was no sense of in which he was, performing or anything like that. I felt like he really gave us access to his heart, for lack of a better way to say it.
I do too. And I think he brought out some nuances of the double win that I hadn't considered before. I mean, like one of them was you can build this into your culture.
Yeah.
You can take care of the people that work for you in the same way you're trying to take care of your clients and your customers. And so often I think in life, we treat our clients and our customers better than we treat the members of our own family, or better than we treat our friends. So that was a big takeaway for me.
I also loved what he said when I asked him about his definition of hospitality. That it's about how you make people feel, and most importantly, making people feel seen. And how our best experiences of hospitality or customer service or whatever, they involve that. If you were to kind of deconstruct them, that's when you felt like a person to somebody. Yeah. And they really see what's unique about you and what matters to you, and then they deliver that in some way. And I thought it was interesting how you said that we were talking about Blackberry Farm, which I feel like we are such broken records on it. People are like, oh gosh, they're talking about Blackberry Farm. But trust us,
they should pay us for the.
I know. Listen, I'm going to get Mary Celeste Bell on this podcast, the proprietor of Blackberry Farm, because I want to talk to her, and I think it'll be fantastic when we get there. But when you said, doesn't it kind of lose something as time goes on because you know what to expect if you're not having your expectations exceeded? And he said, no, because thoughtfulness is always novel. Like what you're being thoughtful about isn't always the same thing. And even the things that are kind of systematized into your culture, as he was talking about, you can build systems to do some of this stuff. I think it's so comforting. And there are so few places in our lives where we're nurtured. Like we nurture our children. We don't nurture each other necessarily. We don't nurture our customers and the people that we're coming into contact with. So when you experience someone thinking about you in advance and caring for you, even if they're going to do it, it just feels so good. It feels like such a relief. I have a yoga class that I go to once a week that's a restorative yoga class. And there are components of that class that I find really nurturing. And that's why I go, not because I want to do yoga, because I want to feel cared for 1 hour.
That's
like
powerful.
Someone else is taking care of me.
So another takeaway, and this will be the last one, but the other takeaway I got was this nuance about work-life integration, my word, not Will's. But I really hadn't thought about that before, because I do think that sometimes we think that work-life balance means that we have to throttle back our expectations in some area of our life. And I like that he said, you got to lean into it. And I know for a fact that the kind of work you're doing and how much that is within something we call the desire zone, where your passion and your proficiency come together. When you're doing that kind of work and it's life-giving, you show up at home in a different state or a different energy than if you're doing work you hate.
So true. And
so it's really, to quote Will, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Oh, I just love this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to talking with you next week and introducing you to somebody else extraordinary.